If you can afford to buy a canner today, I highly recommend that you do so. You can get a canner for $150 or less. This is the very first canner I used for several years. It can process 7-quart jars or 14 pint jars in one batch. Canning is by far the cheapest way to stock your pantry full of meats and vegetables, as well as to replenish that stock. Hey everyone, welcome to the Burnt Brass Homestead channel. Today, I am canning several pounds of rump roast. After cutting about 6.9 pounds of rump roast into cubes, I was left over with this small amount of fat. For now, I will put it with the other fat I have stored in the freezer for another kitchen project. I will be using the raw pack method to can this meat. That simply means I take the raw meat that's cut into cubes, fill a pint or quart-sized jar with the meat, place the lid and ring on the jar, then place the jar in the canner for 75 or 90 minutes, depending on the size of the jar used. I have 4 quart-sized jars already washed. With clean hands, I transfer the meat to the jars. In hindsight, I only needed 3 jars, but for some reason I stretched the meat to 4 jars. This is just shy of 7 pounds of rump roast, but you would do the same thing with chicken, venison, lamb, or whatever other meat you use. Cut the meat into cubes or strips and pack it in tightly in the jars, leaving 1-inch headspace, which is the bottom ring. The guideline is 1 teaspoon of salt per pint, 2 teaspoons for a quart. But salt is not needed to preserve the meat in any way. It is only to add flavor. Feel free to leave out the salt if you are watching your salt intake. With that said, I would like to take a minute to refer you to the National Center for Home Food Preservation. It is a good online resource for canning, although I highly recommend you get a physical copy of one of Ball's mini canning books for under $15 at a Ace Hardware store or Tractor Supply or Rural King. Next, I wipe the rim of each jar with the 50-50 water vinegar solution to remove any food particles or liquid from the meat that would prevent the lid from forming a reliable seal. Next, I add a clean lid and ring to seal the jars without over-tightening the ring. 2 to 3 inches of water was already added to the canner, as well as the rack for the jars to sit on. Now, I add the jars to the canner. The water is hot but not boiling. When using the raw pack method, I adjust the heat to medium-high to allow everything to slowly come to temperature. Next, I seal the canner. This is an All-American 930 canner. Make sure you read the instructions on how to safely operate your canner. Because this is a metal-to-metal canner, I have to wipe the lids with a thin layer of oil to prevent it from sticking at the end of the process. I also tighten the bolts on opposite sides at the same time to get a more leveled seal. Now we wait for the inside of the canner to come to temperature and venting to occur, at which point we add 10 minutes to the timer before placing the weight. There are 3 positions on the weight. I use the 10-pound side since my elevation is below 1,000 feet and I am using a weighted gauge. With the weight on, the pressure inside the canner will start to rise. I reduce the heat slowly as it reaches 10 psi. The weight should jiggle about 1 to 3 times per minute. If it jiggles more than that, reduce the heat a little more. If it jiggles less than once per minute, slightly increase the temperature. Once the gauge is 10 psi, I start the timer for 90 minutes, which is the time needed to complete this canning process for a quart-sized jar. For pint size, it is 75 minutes. I turn off the heat after 90 minutes and allow the pressure gauge to reach 0. Then I wait another 10 to 15 minutes before removing the weight. I unscrew the bolts the same way I fastened them, opposite sides at the same time. When removing the lid, do so away from your face so that the steam can escape in the opposite direction. I remove the jars and place them on a towel. The jars will remain in place overnight before I remove the rings, wipe, label, and then store in the pantry. Because it is a bit cold, I place kitchen towels over the jars to allow them to slowly cool overnight. And that's it, a simple, easy process. Knowing how to can is clutch, especially when you find a great sale on meat. You can buy a lot of it, quickly can it, and store it in your pantry for a couple of years, saving you freezer space. If you like the contents of this channel, please like, share, and subscribe to help this channel to grow.